On this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, Vince Williams Jr. is heading to the All-Star game, not necessarily as an All-Star, but in the Rising Stars Challenge. We'll talk about that. Plus, G.G. Jackson missing a game because of breaking a team rule, fines. Damichael Cole is with us talking about the latest with G.G. Jackson, treble in Memphis for G.G., and we'll preview Grizzlies Rockets, of course. It's a busy Wednesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in with us.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A midweek edition of Locked On Grizzlies for you to enjoy. It is I, Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts for Locked On Grizzlies, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I've covered the Grizzlies here, there, and everywhere over the last decade between the two of us. You've come to the right place for Memphis Grizzlies content and NBA content at large here on Locked On Grizzlies. We are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Check us out on YouTube. Whatever the case might be, Apple, Spotify, however you take in your NBA shows on a daily basis, hopefully Locked On Grizzlies is one of those programs that you are an everydayer for each and every time a new show drops. Damichael Cole, we missed you yesterday, but as we always talk about, you got other things going on in your Grizzlies content creation circuit. You made some news, and G.G. Jackson kind of made some news himself that we'll talk a little bit about more later on in the show. And obviously the Grizzlies have a basketball game coming up tonight against the Houston Rockets. Back-to-back coming up going into the All-Star break for Memphis. But let's lead off with somebody who's got a pretty busy week, and I think you posted on X about this. Vince Williams Jr., now a rising star, replacing for doing an injury replacement, I believe, for Dyson Daniels of the New Orleans Pelicans, interestingly enough. Vince filling in for him. So Vince had a game on Monday. He's got a game tonight. Game on Thursday night, tomorrow, against the Bucks. And then the Rising Stars Challenge is Friday. So that's 4 games and 5 nights. He's kicking it old school, Vince Williams Jr., but it's for a good reason. We thought for a time there that Memphis wasn't going to have any All-Star weekend of acknowledgments for the first time in a long time, but that's not the case. Vince Williams Jr., an injury replacement heading out to the All-Star weekend festivities for Rising Stars.
Yeah, Joe, let's talk about that schedule for a second. What type of bull is that? Whose idea in the league was it to give a team a back-to-back right before All-Star weekend? Like, that's basically saying, oh, the Grizzlies, there's no way that someone from the Grizzlies makes the Rising Stars game. But
cold world.
I mean, they didn't see what came from Vince Williams, and a lot of people didn't see that coming. I mean, it's the hard work. It's just a testament. I mean, and you can make an argument that even some guys on the coaching staff. I mean, Taylor Jenkins, it took almost every injury in the book for him to finally get this opportunity to prove what he's capable of. But without a doubt, he belongs. Once I saw the names on the list, from the get-go, Dyson Daniels stood out to me as over Vince Williams. I don't think we really went in depth with it on here, but I remember seeing Dyson Daniels being in it, and I thought, okay, he's known as a defender. He comes off the bench, I guess decent role player, whatever the case may be, but Vince Williams is guarding the best players as well. Like, he's near the top of the NBA in matchup difficulty, and he's knocking down 3-pointers. We're seeing, kind of a flash of playmaking as of recent. So this is very deserving. He's put the work in, second-round pick, two-way player at the beginning of the year, which kind of feels wild to say now that, Vince Williams was on a 2-way contract at the beginning of the season, to see how impactful he's become with this Grizzlies team. Well-deserved. I mean, this is where he belongs, and it's going to be fun to see, him kind of rise his way. After it's always fun to look back on these Rising Stars games, 5-6 years, see who was in it. Be fun to see, where potentially G.G. one day, but where Vince Williams, stacks up amongst that group.
I want to stress, for those that don't know, I live in the Richmond, Virginia area. Shout out to Virginia Commonwealth University. And I work with several VCU grads, and VCU still loves basketball, going all the way back to that epic Final Four run they had over a decade ago. They've had something like 166 consecutive sellouts at the Siegel Center. They love their Rams basketball. I have a few folks that know that I'm a Grizzlies fan, maybe know that I do the podcast, and they come up and they talk about Vince Williams Jr. almost every day and how wild it is that he's doing what he's doing. Because he was not this at VCU in the Atlantic 10, Damichael. He was very much, absolutely. He was very much 3-and-D, a guy that they could count on to do those specific defensive things, could knock down a three. I remember when you were talking about him, we talked about him briefly when he was drafted, right as I was coming on with Locked On Grizzlies. You know, the skill set of Vince Williams Jr. was supposed to be one that was complementary. And he has gone above and beyond that. Like if you had told us when he was drafted that he was going to be in the Rising Stars game instead of a guy like David Roddy, who's not even on the team anymore, instead of a guy like Jake LaRavia, even a Kennedy Chandler, right? Like the fact that we're in this place where it's Vince Williams Jr. who is that top young player among that group. We've talked about that before here, but you know, even his fans in college are like, how in the heck is he doing this?
It blows my mind, Joe, because I go back every now and then and I go back and listen to when we talked to Zach Kleiman, the Grizzlies general manager and president of basketball operations after the NBA draft. And the questions were about David Roddy because of the trade with the Anthony Melton and him being a first round pick, Jake LaRavia because he was your first pick in the draft, Kennedy Chandler because he was the hometown kid, backup point guard, potentially, you know, the heir to Tyus Jones in that role because everyone knew Tyus had, you know, a couple years left on his deal and whatnot. And then even to a certain degree, Kenneth Lofton Jr. And eventually that became the case as, you know, we got to see Kenneth Lofton Jr. down in the G League and whatnot. He became kind of the afterthought of the draft class. And for no reason at all. It was never because of poor play. And it makes sense a little bit now is that you know him because even in the locker room, you know, the team before the game, because the announcement came out like shortly before the Grizzlies game, and they're celebrating him. And you know, he's just high-fiving guys. It's not a big and explosive thing like that's not him. Like he's always been like that. When we were in Atlanta, I was talking to him one-on-one, and I talked to a lot of these guys one-on-one, and usually, you know, like they open up, they're more expressive and things like that, which he did, but he's even quiet to his teammates. You know, a lot of guys, you know, maybe filter themselves in the media a little bit, and then you talk to some of their teammates that say, oh no, he's nothing like that in the locker room. I'm talking to Santi, I talk to Jaren, I talk to all these guys, and they say, yeah, that's just Vince for you. You know, he's just a mild-mannered, quiet guy. And I say that because it makes sense for his trajectory up to this point. Yeah, one thing that stood out to me, Joe, was when we first started to think about him breaking out, when he early on, I think it was around December, right? And you'll remember, I think I said it on here. He said something to me like, I feel like if I got this opportunity last season, I would have been doing the same thing. And to me, that was a player just listening to that said, I should have been playing last season. I mean, he didn't say that, but I could have done this last year. This is nothing new to me. This is how I play the game of basketball. And all he did was, even though he felt like he could have done the same exact thing, just kept quiet, went down to the hustle, played some games, worked his butt off in the summer league, and earned this opportunity. So you gotta respect it, you know, the way that he's kind of grinded his way to this point.
He's extremely impressive in the way that he's done it, kind of a self-made type of player. And again, I want to stress, nobody saw this coming. Like I knew Vince Williams Jr. could do this. No, you couldn't. No, you didn't. You might have thought that he could be an NBA rotation player. You might have thought that he would be in the league for a while with a specific skill set. Nobody saw him being a rising star caliber type of player. And Damichael's right. We check back on these rosters in a few years, see who's still around, who isn't. That is a fun exercise to do every once in a while. But I do think that Vince Williams Jr. has a game with skills that will translate. And as Memphis gets healthier, he won't be asked to do as much in terms of usage, in terms of creating off the dribble. He's doing that right now because he has to. There is literally no one else except for Scottie Pippen Jr. So he's doing things that he isn't necessarily fully equipped to do for a winning team. We got to remember they're in the midst of a 9-game losing streak. So it's not like he's putting up these numbers and it's leading to winning. But the things that he does particularly well as a defender, shooting the three, that's stuff that when it is winning time again in Memphis, he'll continue to contribute in those areas. So congratulations to Vince Williams Jr., rising star. Damichael and I, of course, will talk more about that later on this week and on Monday when we review the All-Star Weekend festivities. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We keep trying to find the bright side here on Locked On Grizzlies, but GG Jackson has gotten into a bit of trouble of late. We'll see if it's much ado about nothing or if there's something there when we talk to Damichael Cole about it next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Hungry Root. Hungry Root is your partner for healthy living. It's the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality groceries and simple, healthy recipes delivered to your door. All you do is you take a fun, short quiz, and Hungry Root will get to know your personal health goals, what you like to eat, the kitchen appliances you use, and so much more. Then they'll build you a personalized cart with all your grocery needs for the week and give you delicious recipe recommendations to put those groceries to good use. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Save hours planning, shopping, and cooking. Hungry Root delivers food you'll love. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On Grizzlies Day listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. That's right. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link for Locked On Grizzlies and make sure that you know that we here at Locked On Grizzlies sent you. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're talking GG Jackson and the little bit of trouble he's gotten in of late. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm Joe Mullinax, joined by Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I am your co-host. I've covered the Grizzlies for over a decade. You come to the right place for Grizzlies content. And we sang the praises of Vince Williams Jr., and he certainly deserves it. A little bit of criticism of late for GG Jackson, and to be honest with you, he deserves it. Breaking team rules. It's been rumored and, certain reports confirming, some fines that have been levied against GG. Just the idea of any of those kinds of situations, obviously as the Grizzlies beat reporter there for the Commercial Appeal, Damichael, maybe you can confirm or deny some of those things. Jaren Jackson had, I think, a pretty good quote about it that kind of stands where I stand on the matter. But what you know about GG Jackson, of course, not playing recently due to a violation of team rules and whatever else might be going on there with the young Grizzly star.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everybody kind of understands what I'm about to say here, because when we talk about GG Jackson, you got to preface it with he's 19 years old.
I'm pretty sure he's the youngest player in the league,
he
right?
Is. You're 100% right. He's the young. I mean, he barely made the cut. I think his birthday is something like December 17th or 18th.
Should literally be a college freshman.
And you got to December 31st to make the cut. So he barely, made the cut to even declare for the draft when he did. But with that being said, he's 19 years old, and of course, with that comes certain little maturity things. And with him, it's just about being a professional. This is something he's talked about. And when you hear players talk about, just being a professional, like Ken Lofton Jr. used to say it all the time, being a professional. But it's different with GG. It's really about being a professional, because it is the adjustment for him. And it's the one that he is battling the most to make at this point. So the fines and things like that. Yes, that is something that GG said himself. He's been fined, I think 4 times, up before the suspension, the team issued suspension. And the thing with that is those 4 fines were early in the season. This was something that, Kleiman met with GG Jackson with at a certain point. And for a while, GG was clean, very little mistakes and things like that. And of course, now the 1-game suspension comes out. And all this to me just goes back to the professionalism standpoint. Of course, we'll talk to GG later on today and get more clarity from his perspective on what he's going to learn from this. But when you think about things, the professionalism part of this, Joe, it's the little things. It's showing up on time, right? It's not missing, key events, key functions, and things like
Right.
that. Like
Yeah, I was going
that
to
is,
ask, are we talking him being late to
yeah,
practice? Are we
yeah,
talking him, maybe
yeah.
missing, Coach Jenkins talks about his
Those,
the
yeah.
vitamins that they do. Is it kind of a combination all the above
The
situation?
play groups and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's being punctual, yeah, and things like that. So, those are the things that you want to see, GG clean up. And I don't think it's a big concern. It's just, it's a concern because he missed the game, but it's not something that you could expect to carry on. I think for the large part of his career, because at the end of the day, he's got some players on that team that are going to get on him. I was talking to Jaron, and you saw the quote. I asked Jaron about it, and
Mhm.
Jaron, I approached Jaron, basically said, Jaron, you're the oldest guy on the team now. Like, when these situations don't come up a lot with you guys, but when they do, what's your approach to them? And he said, look, I Gigi's going to be one of the best players in the NBA, so act like it. I mean, there was no laughing. It was a very serious demeanor, that Jaron showed when he said that to me. So, I think the guys in the locker room are very, very, very careful with giving Gigi the big head and things like that because of maturity things. I remember there was one situation, and the saying, Joe, there's truth in every joke, and there's a situation, I think, when the Grizzlies played the Warriors. Now, you remember that game, Gigi, big game. The
Yep.
Grizzlies
Mhm.
beat the Warriors. Steph Curry, Draymond Green shot it out. Gigi Jackson and whatnot. And I remember during that game, Gigi Jackson made a tough shot or whatever the case may be. And Steph Curry was standing at the scores table, and Jaren Jackson Jr. was standing at the scores table. And Steph makes like this face, like, oh, that was good. Like, that was really good. And Jaren sees it. And after the game in the locker room, Jaren's joking around because Gigi wasn't in there at the time. And he said, I was going to tell Gigi about it during the game, but I was like, nah, let me tell him after the game. I don't want to tell him during the game. And you laugh it off in the moment, but that's kind of where it is, with Gigi right now. Like Desmond Bain, you could say, LeBron was impressed with the shot that you took, and Desmond Bain's gonna brush it off. And all right, next play, let's go. Gigi still, I mean, we saw it with the TNT moment and things like that. Still that, what, Steph Curry? So it's just the professional part, and I think that comes with age more than anything. He spent 1 year in college, and he's here now, so I don't think it's anything long term.
And I do think it's okay for a Grizzlies fan to kind of pause given our luck with suspensions of late, right? So obviously this is not that, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to take this time. Damichael did a really good job there explaining it's punctuality. It's the stuff that you have to do regardless of what your profession is, right? Like, you got to show up to work on time. You have to do the parts of your job that are connected to performance that your superiors, bosses, whatever you want to call them, that they outline for you to do. He's 19 years old. When I was 19 years old, I was sitting in a college dorm room. All right. I was playing like Halo or Modern Warfare or something like that.
Yeah,
I was
I was
playing
missing
video
some classes,
games.
though.
I was sleeping in. I was doing things I wasn't supposed to do. This guy is a professional athlete, right? So having a little bit of grace, remembering the last time you were 19 and the choices that you made, that doesn't mean he shouldn't be held accountable. The Grizzlies are holding him accountable. But that perspective is key here. This isn't the same as what Ja Morant did or was accused of doing. This is a young player making young player mistakes, and hopefully he learns from them.
Yeah, I agree. It's really that simple, right? Hope he, give him this 1 game suspension, and now the next time we see him, guess what? He's going to be asked questions about it, and he's kind of gonna, everything's been great for Gigi. This is kind of his real adversity now, right? The first time, everyone's, oh, Gigi Jackson, you've been so good in the G League, and then he gets, the 2-way and the contract, and now it's Gigi. How do you respond from this? What are you going to learn from this, and all those type of things. And it's not just that, it's not just him answering those questions, it's him showing it, not getting fined for the rest of the season, not facing another suspension or anything like that. And I think that'll ease, the concern. But overall, like I said, I think it's more of just him kind of being fast tracked at this point. Like, I don't think the Grizzlies expected to say, hey, we were gonna put him on a standard deal this early on in the process and be playing him real minutes. But the situations happen faster than probably a lot of people expected.
I would say that's more than fair to guess. The Grizzlies were planning on him spending most of the time out of the limelight in South Haven, Mississippi, playing for the hustle, not necessarily being in a position to talk to Shaquille O'Neal and play against Steph Curry. That's an example of the season perhaps going away that it shouldn't have gone. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode previewing Memphis's game tonight against the Houston Rockets. Old friend Dylan Brooks, the honeymoon might be over there in Houston. The Rockets tail spinning a little bit. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to shout out Locked On's first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. It's also now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. Damichael and I both love eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your car alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to United States customers. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies Rockets preview. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Make sure you're following him on X at Damichael C. Follow me on X at Joe Mullinax. Damichael, we've talked Vince Williams Jr., we've talked G.G. Jackson. Current troubles and air quotes aside, two of the bright spots of this difficult season for the Memphis Grizzlies. That difficult trudge continues tonight at home against the Rockets. It's an interesting contest because of the Dylan Brooks factor, obviously. You check Rockets Twitter or Rockets X, and there's a lot of why is Dylan Brooks in the game? He's shooting too much. Looks like that honeymoon period might be over. Houston not playing as well as they did earlier in the year. Still in the play-in conversation, to be sure, but just cooling off pretty considerably compared to where they were. I talked about, and you did as well, Damichael, earlier in the week, I don't see this losing streak going beyond 10 games. That means I think they're going to win one of the next two. This one seems like the one to win to me. Again, Houston not as good as Milwaukee, obviously not as talented. Memphis gets the rest or has been rested. They should have G.G. Jackson back. They have all the momentum in that particular way, gaining some offensive scoring talent. Can they connect that to being able to put the ball in the bucket after a pretty abysmal offensive showing against the Pelicans? And it was bad for New Orleans in the fourth quarter as well. But how Memphis can use that energy from GG, find better offensive production against another decent to good defensive team in the Houston Rockets?
Well, if there's one thing that we've learned about, Taylor Jenkins and, Grizzlies defenses over the course of his tenure as head coach is one thing he likes to do is find the weakest link on the offensive end, on the opposing team's offense from a shooting standpoint. It's usually not looking for those non-shooters who are going to be on the perimeter and making them beat you. And they've been burned a lot from it. We just saw Herb Jones led the Pelicans in scoring in that game, in part because the Grizzlies
again,
he's done it multiple times, right? And we saw Rui Hachimura do it. We just, we talked about this a lot. Like, you guys get it. But in this game, it's going to be interesting because there's no Fred VanVleet. He's out, through the All-Star break or whatnot. So Amin Thompson, the rookie, is already going to draw the start at point guard. And Joe, I don't know if you've seen this guy. He's super explosive. Like
Mm-hmm.
he has that he has that jetpack in his back. Like, but hasn't shot the ball well.
What to do with it once you're in the position? That's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, he can get to that cup and get right past you. But the point is, not only him, Dylan Brooks. You mentioned him. I know it was a couple games ago. We saw some people, kind of calling out some of his shot attempts, but overall, he's still playing better in Houston because he responded from that game. Right, made six
Correct.
threes the next game against the Knicks, and was a big reason why they won that game. I think he finished with like 23 points. So, with that being said, I still say, hey, Dylan Brooks is another one. So my point is, you got multiple guys in this Rockets starting lineup. You can do some soft closeouts to it, where Men Thompson, you're not running at him recklessly. Dylan Brooks, you're not running at him recklessly. Jabari Smith, you might respect him a little bit more. Jalen Green, we know he's capable of getting hot regardless of what his percentages say. He can go on a heater at any moment. I think from a stylistic standpoint, this is the type of game, as we've said, Joe, if they're going to end this streak, this is the game you have to do it. And from a stylistic standpoint, that's how they can do it. That Pelicans game, I didn't know how they could win it. Like, I couldn't point out, if they did this, or this, they will win. This game, I mean, other than play hard, but this game, you can go into this game and say, hey, let's take away Sengun. Let's put maybe let Jabari see a couple bodies when he takes the ball off the dribble. Put Vince Williams Jr. on Jalen Green and kind of hope that he can slow him down to a certain degree. And you live with the rest. If Amin Thompson or Dylan Brooks scores 20 plus and they beat you, you say, hey, you know what? It just wasn't our night. So from that perspective, Joe, that's where they have a chance to me.
They definitely have a chance in that way. They have a chance in terms of the scoring acumen of a G.G. Jackson off the bench, assuming they continue to use him in that way. That's a wonderful way to use him. Just the scoring, the craftiness ahead of his time, ahead of his age in that way.
Mm-hmm.
This is another one of those games where I'm not sure they have someone that can defend Jaren Jackson Jr., right? And maybe
he cooked them earlier this year.
We won't be able to say that on tomorrow's episode because, in theory, Giannis can defend Jaren Jackson Jr. But
and Brook,
and Brook Lopez too. Lopez had a very good game against Jokic recently. I think that the important thing to point out is Jaren is a mismatch nightmare against most teams in the NBA, and if he can remain efficient, if he can keep his passing up, I think that's really going to help a good bit. The Grizzlies injury report is always something that matters in these games, obviously, as well, because you don't know, especially at the point guard position, what you're going to have on a day-to-day basis going into these contests. First night of a back-to-back. Rose is questionable going into the Rockets game. Zaire questionable. We haven't seen Zaire Williams in some time. So that injury report's starting to get a little bit shorter. Assuming those guys play, how do you see Derrick Rose impacting things? If Zaire does play, how many minutes does he get in this new look Grizzlies outfit? Does he supplant Lamar Stevens, Yuta Watanabe? Again, they're not healthy by any stretch of the imagination, but they're at least getting some bodies back in the fold. And plus, they have a new 10-day contract guy that they signed.
Yeah, Jordan Goodwin is in the equation now, and I think that matters. We can't just speak of him as a kind of a throw-in because at the end of the day, now you're about to see kind of, do we call it politics when guys are being held off of the floor because of
maybe
some contractual stuff? Is that considered politics? So you're about to see some NBA politics stuff go on. We'll go potentially. That's what we can talk about next week. When the games are away, but just kind of touching on a little bit here, like Scottie Pippen Jr., Trey Jemison, they cannot play every game for the remainder of the season. And I got some clarity on that, and I'll briefly touch on it here because I gave Taylor Jenkins, some slack last week before I had to go look deep in his CBA, and I did realize that they are on prorated two-way contracts, so they don't get the 50 game maximum. We'll go kind of deeper into like the breakdown there and why they can't play the rest of the season next week.
Wow.
But so they don't get 50 games. They only, I think, it's about 18 games left for Scottie Pippen, and Trey Jemson's probably right behind that. But the point is, that's why Jordan Goodwin is about to be important, because over these 10 days, he's probably gonna play a little bit. Like, I think he has 3 games. They have 3 games over that period, because there'll be 2 before the All-Star break. Then he'll come back after the break, play 1 game. So he'll probably factor into that. We know Jacob Gilyard. Don't know the exact number, but he's close. I think it's 3 or 4 games left for him, but it's kind of iffy on his standpoint, because when he gets DNPs, those count as active games. Remember, it's 50 active games, not 50 games played. DNPs count as games you were active, as long as you were injured or not sent down to the Memphis Hustle. So it's kind of tricky to figure out how many. I haven't figured out a way to really nail that number down, but I do know that it's something that it's probably going to expire on him before the end of February. So Scottie Pippen Jr., as you mentioned, with the injuries, him being out, I think it's big, and that puts a little bit more pressure on Derrick Rose. I think he's going to be available, but Derrick Rose is not going to play 30 minutes. So he's going to come out there, probably play 15, 16, 20 minutes, and for those minutes, he's going to have to be really good, because they're not going to have a lot of point guard play. Jordan Goodwin has the size of a point guard. He can make a couple plays here and there, but he's not Jacob Gilyard from a table setting perspective. So I do think that at the end of the day, we saw the Grizzlies score 87 points the other night. This is another game. Like, if they lose this game, I don't think it's a shootout type game. I think it's a game they struggle to score against one of the top defenses. Ime Udoka runs a very sound, physical, tough defensive system. And that's the way they could lose this game, from the standpoint of, missing Scottie Pippen Jr. You missed that guy who Taylor Jenkins said himself, another guy who can touch the paint and impact the defenses. They don't have a lot of guys who can do that right now. Derrick Rose is capable in, short bursts. That's why you kind of going to need him back from that perspective. Jacob Gilyard can do it. He's more of a threat to pass when he penetrates into the paint more than score. But you need those guards. So we'll see, again, from the politics standpoint, if Jacob Gilyard is even made available to play because of that. He's not hurt. So we'll see what happens on that end. We know Scottie Pippen Jr. is out. So it could be Derrick Rose, Jordan Goodwin, and maybe Luke Kennard, or it could just be Derrick Rose and Luke Kennard in that group. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Grizzlies handle that.
All the more reason to keep watching, even as the season is lost. Lots of different ways that Taylor Jenkins can approach this. On our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we got lots of basketball to talk before the All-Star break. Obviously, we'll recap Grizzlies Rockets. We'll preview Grizzlies Bucks. Continue to take a look at how the rotation is shaking out with all these new bodies. We'll talk about that and more on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you guys so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. However you get your podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all those places. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Make sure you're checking that out after you check out this show here on Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for joining myself and Damichael. We appreciate it as always. We'll catch you on our Thursday edition of the show. Stay locked in, everybody. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Grizzlies, Rockets, Grizzlies, Bucks. That'll be our focus the next time we're together.